Good afternoon. Well, anyway. I'm Lillian Lodge Kopenhaver, Executive Director of the Kopenhaver Center for the Advancement of Women in Communication here at FIU. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the Kopenhaver Center Leadership Seminar Series and Webinar Series that we're having today. The mission of our center is to empower young women professionals and academics in all the fields of communication in order to develop visionaries and leaders who can make a difference in their professions and in their communities. We are delighted to have you join us this afternoon. Our speaker will provide you with a wealth of information that you'll find both interesting and useful as you pursue your career paths in the field of communication. Our keynote speaker this afternoon, Caridad Hernandez-Wood, is executive producer of investigations and special projects for CBS 4 Miami. She is responsible for the production of stories generated by a team of investigators and reporters dedicated to bringing awareness to important issues, exposing wrongdoing, and keeping viewers up to speed on consumer, health, and entertainment news in the South Florida community. She also supervises the production of the station's political show, Facing South Florida with Jim DeFede, and Focus South Florida, which airs on MyTV 33. Carrie and her team have executed a long list of Emmy Award-winning investigations. Some that have had an impact here in South Florida include Race Matters, Last Chance Boot Camp, and The Truth About Patrick Murphy with Jim DeFede, and Push for Safer Pools, and Cave Diving Beyond the Limit with investigator David Sutta. Prior to joining CBS 4, Carrie was an executive producer for CNN Newsroom in Atlanta, where she was responsible for the production of the 2-hour morning news block for 3 years. While at CNN, she also produced a show called Education Makeover, which focused on families struggling to improve the environment within their homes in hopes of their children getting better grades in school. Carrie gained her experience as a producer by working at various television stations in both Miami and Philadelphia. She is a graduate of Florida International University with a degree in broadcast journalism. Carrie also volunteers with the Asian American Journalists Association, where she teaches broadcast journalism to high school students and serves as a mentor for the Kopenhaver Center for Young Latina Women in our mentoring program. It's my pleasure to present Carrie Hernandez-Wood.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And thank you for coming. Thank you, Lillian, for having me and for inviting me. And not Lillian, yeah, thank you both. I'm from both Lillians, right? And for working on making this happen. So I'm really excited to be here with you. And thank you for taking the time. I know you guys have super, super busy schedules. So Lillian asked me to come, and we were trying to decide what we're going to talk about. And, you know, I think my role, my path has been, and we call it taking the leadership in media. When I was a student here at FIU, I honestly didn't envision, where I would be today. I honestly, when I first started out, I thought that I wanted to be a reporter. I wanted to be on camera, and I thought that was going to be my path. One of my first positions, I actually started working at Channel 7 was my first job. I was actually a tape loader. That's when we had tapes back then. We don't even have tapes anymore. This is 1993, I want to say. And from there, I went to work at Channel 10. I was hired as an associate producer, and I was just writing scripts for our newscasts. And at the same time, I was working on my reel, because again, I wanted to work on being a reporter, and I thought that, that was going to be my path. Until one day, I was actually walking by our conference room where we hold our editorial meetings, and that oftentimes, the morning teams get together, and that's where everyone decides where the stories are going to be decided for the day. And I noticed that at that decision-making table were a lot of men, a lot of white people, not a lot of women. Again, and it's 1996 now, probably at this point. And I started realizing who was really making the decisions and who was really deciding between the producers and the executive producers and the news director and the managing editor, who was really deciding what those stories were going to look like. Of course, it's a team effort across the board. You're always going to have reporters, and I don't want to say that reporters and anchors don't. They have a say in what happens. but designing what the rundown was going to look like, designing what the presentation was going to look like, that power fell in the hands of the producers. And so I quickly realized that I wanted to be at that table rather than being out in the field. So I started to switch my path. And I started to work with executive producers and learning how to write, and learning how to write teases, and learning how to write scripts and whatnot. And soon after that, I was able to work my way from associate producer to a producer. I worked on a lot of morning newscasts. By that time, I'm at Channel 4, learning how to construct a rundown, learning about managing what stories we're going to cover, working with associate producers and whatnot. And early on, when you're in those positions, and I want to say that, you know, leadership doesn't happen where I am now, or people that work, you know, that are news directors. Leadership, especially in this industry, is really awesome because it comes at every stage in the game. If you get to be in that newsroom or in whatever environment you are where you're deciding what the news is going to be, that's a huge, huge privilege. It's a huge opportunity. You get to have a say. You get to pitch your stories. You know, whatever level that might be, that opportunity is there. You know, I am open. You know, a lot of times my editors come up to me, stories, the writers, the photographers. I mean, sometimes even the janitor, you know, who's there will come and pitch a story, and we're willing to listen. And so a lot of words and phrases come to mind when I think about that process or what we get to do. And I think it's passion. I think it's a privilege. I think of power. I think of courage. It's opportunity. I think that we have to be honest. I think about our credibility. You're constantly learning. You're constantly hoping that you can bring truth to power. And at one point in the day, you know, those words and phrases always, when I look at what I get to do or what we get to do, those phrases and words always, you know, are important for me. So as a producer, though, when you're helping decide what stories we're going to do and what stories we're going to do for the day, that impacts what people are watching at home, you know, and that's a huge opportunity, right? I think sometimes, and you guys are going to say, but the media does this and the media does that. I know, and I'll answer all those questions, and I'm sure you'll have. But we really do try our best with the resources that we have, with the time deadlines that we have, with the people that we have. The people that are sitting at that table really are trying their best to bring the stories to the community that is going to make the most impact. At the same time, right, you have a business. You have to be competitive. So you have all these other, you know, circumstances or variables that play into the entire decision-making process, into what goes into what stories get on the air and what don't. Then you've got to play politics. You got to play personalities. I mean, all that does play into it. So let me go back to, you know, a little bit of my career. So I'm a producer at Channel 4. I work my way up to producing the 5:30 newscast. Again, I'm learning. I'm learning from our reporters. I'm learning from my news director. I don't know exactly how to always stack a rundown. I don't exactly always know how the best stories to choose, but I'm always making sure that I'm open, that I'm always open to people with information, that I'm always looking to people that are willing to teach me, to work with them. I'm always looking to gather information from my anchors and my reporters that, you know, so they have more experience than I do. And I say this to you because when you get to that point or you get to your internships, you always have to look for opportunity. You always have to look for what are your resources, right? So that you can maximize your experience while you're there. I think one of the biggest mistakes that I see, and I'm going to veer off topic for a second here, but that I see interns make when they come into our newsroom is that you give them one thing to do, and that's the only thing that they do. And they never expand or say, let me walk down the hallway and shake someone's hand or meet, you know. I'll give a perfect example. This summer there was an intern, and she was working in another department, and they gave her a spot. I walk by that door every single day. That young lady never said, good morning, let me meet you, is there anything I can do? She never walked into the newsroom to meet other people. She just sat in that spot that they gave her and didn't, and I'm just sitting here going, oh my God, you're sitting in a wealth of, and I'm not talking about me, there is a wealth of people and information that is sitting right across the hall, and you haven't even taken the time or 5 minutes or even thought about, okay, so my shift is from 12 to 4, so she really worked 12 to 4. she never thought about, let me work till 4:05 and meet people and introduce myself and ask questions. And I thought that that was such a waste of her internship, because then finally, the end of her internship, she comes out of her office and I see her in the hallway and she's like, it's my last day. I'm like, okay. She's like, and she was actually, I remember now, she went to UF. She was going to UF. And she goes, it's my last day. And I go, okay, so what's next? She goes, I don't know, I'm just going to graduate. She didn't really ever make a plan. She didn't come into her internship with a strategy. And I'm not saying that, you know, so maybe she might have said, okay, I don't really want to work in exactly into a newsroom or a TV newsroom. I know more people than, I don't just work or know people that work in TV. I know people that work at advertising agencies. I know people that work in marketing. I know people that work at radio stations. I know people that work at newspapers. I know tons of people. And by her not making that connection and not seizing on that opportunity and not seizing on the resources that are around her, I mean, I don't know where she's going to end up. Or, I mean, she lost out on that. She lost out on that opportunity. So I say that to say, you know, going back to, as I'm working my way through, I'm looking all around me. I am making connections and I'm networking with the people that are around me at the time. And to this day, all those networking and all those connections and all those relationships, I can still tap into to this day. You know, my phone still rings sometimes and people will text me and be like, you know, da 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 da, and I haven't talked to them in 10 years, or I haven't worked with them in 10 years. But you know, we'll still pick up wherever we left off. So I do want you guys to walk away with knowing how important that is. So from Channel 4, I'm producing the 6 o'clock newscast. I start talking to our sportscaster, Jim Barry, and he says to me, so Carrie, what's next? And I'm like, wait, I'm just happy to be a producer right now and in my mid-20s. And he's like, Miami's not it. You have to try working in another market. You have to have another experience. And I'm like, what? Leave my parents, like my Cuban parents, like that didn't even let me go away to college and said, you're going down the street to school? and he said, yep, you got to try. You got to try something out. He goes, not every newsroom is built the same way. Newsrooms are all different. There's a different environment for them, and you need to build that experience. I said, okay. So I started applying for jobs. And I applied in Chicago, I applied in Philly, a couple other cities I can't remember, but I know I flew there for those interviews. Anyways, I ended up in Philly, producing their 11 o'clock newscast. And it was huge. And my parents were super disappointed because, you know, I told my dad, I'm like, hey, I'm going to the 4th largest market in the country. And he's like, but you're not married yet. And I'm like, okay, Dad. I'm like, okay, got it. So, you know, no, I'm not married. Sorry, you know. So they were like, no. But yeah, so I go to Philadelphia, and it was tough. It was a huge, huge change. I mean, there you're working in the 4th largest market. There's people who have been in the business for 30 years. I mean, it was super intimidating. They were not having Miami news. You know, the way they do news there is different. They have a very different perspective. The angles that they're going on, just all different, you know. And I walked in there thinking I was some hotshot producer, but, you know, they let me know I wasn't, you know, quickly. And it was a huge experience. But again, I did what I do. I got to know people. I connected with reporters. I connected with the anchors. I learned as much as I could. I learned and learned and learned and learned. And I just soaked in living in Philly. You know, on the weekends, I would just drive around and just try to learn the city. Because I remember one time I pitched a story and the reporter was in XYZ place, and I said, well, why don't we just move that, you know, there was a breaking news and we're talking logistics. I'm like, well, why don't you just move that reporter to there? And they're like, well, Carrie, that's like moving the reporter from Miami to Orlando. And, you know, you don't want to walk into that situation, right? You want to know as much as you can about what's going on. So I started driving around and learning the city as best as I could so that I could make, again, the best decisions when we were deciding what stories that we were going to make. And in the meantime, I had a wealth of people who had worked there with their knowledge and their experience to do a newscast. I lasted there about 2.5 years. And then I found an opportunity to come back to Miami to work as an executive producer for NBC. And I didn't want to leave Philly that fast, and I probably was a little bit too soon for me, but executive producer positions don't open up in Miami every day. And I wanted to get back home. And not because I was with, but I have a daughter. And I had left my daughter at the time. She was in 3rd grade, so I left her here with her dad. And so I was flying back and forth from Philly to when I was very, very ambitious. I was very ambitious, and you know, again, I had her when I was young, but I was very ambitious and passionate about this job, and I really wanted to have different kinds of experiences. But I did have a huge support system between my family and her dad, you know, to get her going. And she would spend the she spent the summers with me in Philly, and she went to camp up there. So we made it work. And I know that that wouldn't be a perfect situation for anybody to make happen, but I made it work. I figured it out because it's what I wanted. And so I came back, you know, I wanted to be back here because that whole flying back and forth was crazy. And I got to be an executive for the morning show at NBC6. And again, that was a new experience, a new opportunity. And this time it becomes different because the minute that you land into a management role and you're leading people and you're leading producers and you're coming up with visions for your shows and whatnot, now you become more of a coach. You have to become a cheerleader. You have to be that person in your newsroom that people can count on and come to you when things are going wrong, right? You're not just managing your shows and your rundown, now you're managing people and the product at the same time. I think those are the biggest difference between managers and the roles of producers and associate producers. Once you become a manager, now you're managing both. So that was an interesting experience. You know, that morning show, you're up at 1 a.m., 2 a.m., you know, to get the show on the air at 5 a.m. And you're done at noon or 1 o'clock, which is great because the gym is totally open. The Publix, there's no lines of Publix, like nobody's around. You can have plenty of opportunity to do whatever you want. You have no social life, right? Because now you're going to bed at 7, 8 o'clock at night. So, you know, forget happy hour. That's over with. And your dating life is, yeah, I'm still not getting married anytime soon. But I loved what I did. I loved what I did. Working as an executive producer, watching what we do on our daily shows. Meantime, I have an eye on what I really want, right? I'm doing the daily stuff. I'm fulfilling what I have to do. I'm on the path, but I'm also looking ahead to what I'm really liking in the newsroom. And what attracted to me was investigations and special projects. And I'm figuring out and thinking, what do I have to do to jump over there? Because most times, and it doesn't happen, I don't see it happening, for people to walk in straight into an investigative unit or walk into a special projects unit straight out of college is really not happening. And you kind of don't want it to happen. Because I think to be in that type of unit, you need to have some experience, you have to have some years under your belt, you have to know I appreciate, you know, knowing what's going on a day-to-day basis before, you know, jumping over into that world. But I'm watching, I'm paying attention, I'm watching all the investigations, I'm getting to know the reporters, I'm still doing what I have to do, I'm still on this track, but I'm watching that track over there. And I started thinking, okay, well, how do I strategize to get to special projects? Okay, well, that means I'm going to have to start writing more packages. And that means I'm going to have to work a little bit more. So how do I add more hours to my day? So I figured out a way. I went to my news director and I was like, I'll help with special projects and whatnot. And she's like, well, what do you want to do? I was like, well, I want to produce some pieces. And she's like, but your schedule's full. I go, that's fine. I'll work overtime. When the noon show's over with, I can go out and shoot a story, at least, and then log and write it the next day and whatnot. And that's what I did. So early on, I didn't do a lot, just a little bit of writing packages, working on investigations, you know, just asking the reporters if I can make some calls for them, can I pull some records for them, and I would do it on the side, And I did that while I was at Channel 6. And then all of a sudden, Channel 6 gets put up for sale. We're told that we're going to lose our jobs. They literally were telling us that we were probably going to be laid off by the end of the year because they were going to make cutbacks and changes and whatnot. So I was like, okay, what am I going to do? So I had to prepare myself. So get the resume out, clean it up, and start applying to different places. And I applied to NBC and DC. And then I don't know what happened, but anyway, CNN comes up, and I applied to CNN. I didn't think I was going to get in, but I get in. So I choose to go to CNN. And a lot of people at that time, now it's 2008, at that time a lot of people at my station a lot of managers were trying to figure out where they were going to go and making different moves. Even our news director was like working on, you know, she ended up going to MSNBC and became their executive editor. Tom Llamas, who's on ABC News now. So a lot of, And even though it was a bad time and we were all like super concerned that we were going to lose our jobs, it's interesting. When you have something strange happen and it just throws your life up into, you don't know what's going to happen, it can set you off into some of the best experiences ever. I mean, Tom Llamas is now reporting for a network news outlet, and he was just a reporter here in Miami. Our news director, Yvette Miley, went on to become an executive editor at MSNBC. And actually, our news director now, Liz Roldan, who's with me at Channel 6, she ended up going to go work for a PR company. And twists and turns, and now she's a news director. She was a managing editor at the time. So everyone landed well. I think that as long as you're talented and you're dedicated and you're passionate, you're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. You don't have to worry about that. It's just figuring out where you're going to end up. So I ended up at CNN. I ended up in Atlanta. I was the executive producer of their 9 to 11 a.m. broadcast Monday through Friday with Heidi Collins, and then I had Kira Phillips. And that was a great experience. It really, really forced me to grow as a manager, because now you're playing with the big boys. I mean, it's like an operation like no other. I mean, there's just people. I mean, there were people I was talking to in Hong Kong that to this day I've never met, but they're in my shows in D.C. and New York, and it's a machine. It's this huge machine of people, and you just have to be on top of it and be aggressive again and be ambitious. Definitely works for a type A personality, and again, kind of sign up to have a really not a life. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, you have to work hard to find balance. You really, really do. So that was a great experience. Again, I'm still thinking, I need to get out of this daily grind. I want to work on special projects. And that's while I was there, I worked on this special project called Education Makeover. And I actually convinced them to give me a budget of like $20,000 to produce this half-hour special with Steve Perry, who was a principal out of Connecticut. And I convinced them to do it. They gave me the money. I got to do half-hour specials out of it. And again, so then I got a little bit more experience there in the special projects arena. So little by little, from the work that I did at Channel 6 and some of the work that I did at CNN, set me up for the position that I have now at Channel 4. And I'm not going to lie, I didn't walk in knowing everything, at Channel 4, but I had enough trust and credibility and passion and courage and power to tell Liz, I can do this, right? And she knew my past work. She knew how dedicated I was, and she knew that whatever I didn't know, I'd be able to figure it out. Because as long as you're able to convince people, if at least people convince me that they're gonna be able to figure it out and they're gonna be passionate enough and not expect for everything just to fall on their laps, I'm gonna give them a shot. And most people are too. So, and that's where we are today. And now I have, a huge opportunity now to work on stories with Jim DeFeeti, who's one of, I think one of the best investigators in town. He is truly awesome to work with. And when you talk about someone, you guys should have him come talk to you guys. When you talk about someone who is just dedicated and to doing what he does, it's just mind blowing. And he will work 7-8 days a week. And sometimes that's what it takes. Sometimes that's what it takes to get what we do. But again, I want to go back to where you address my audience. It's now. You guys have to start now. You have to start. If this is really what you want to do, if this is what you're really interested in it, you got to grab it, with both hands and be, passionate about it and be courageous about it and start being leaders in the positions that you are now. You should be networking and connecting and building relationships with people in the school, with your professors, with the people that are around you, because you never know who you're sitting with right now that you're going to need or you're going to need to connect with later. And I'm sure you've heard this over and over again. You're like, well, Carrie, I don't have time. Make time. You have to make time. And I think when you have speakers coming in, are you connecting with them? Are you getting their cards? Are you staying in touch with them? And I know that it might not be at this moment right now the perfect time to connect with them, but it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt to at least start planting the seed of at least checking in with them. And I know it feels weird and I know it feels uncomfortable, because sometimes I do it too, sending that email to someone that you really don't know. But sooner they'll remember you and they'll appreciate it. You know, even if you check in with them every 3 to 6 months. Hey, I appreciate sometimes with my students from AAJA, at least check in and let me know where they are in their careers, because they're starting, you know, they were in high school when I was working with them. But I appreciate when they shoot me an email and they're like, Carrie, I'm at this stage, I'm at college now. Or Carrie, I need a reference letter. Or Carrie, this is what I'm working on next. It doesn't bog down my day. I appreciate that they're staying in touch, you know, and along the lines, if they're going to need help, because at least they planted that seed with me and they don't just reach out to me 6 years later and they're like, Carrie, I need a job. I'm going to be like, but if along the way I know your progression and I know how you're doing, and most people that I work with are very willing to do that, as long as you're staying in touch with them, they're going to be willing to help you out when it's needed, you know. And even right now, I have an editor. I was just on the phone with her the other day. She's in her mid-20s. She was working at our station for a while. She stays in touch. And she told me that she left here to go work for ESPN, and she's doing awesome. And she's thinking about what her next moves are going to be. We had a conversation about that. I know some people. I said to her, why don't you call so-and-so and so-and-so and so. It was a quick conversation. And now that so-and-so and so have connected her to somewhere else. So does that make sense what I'm saying about those networking and those relationships? And it's key. And I know it's going to feel awkward and you don't ask people for, you know, things, but it's actually getting to know them. And people don't mind helping, as long as you're helping them as well. I love it if you called me, you connected with me, and you also pitched me a story idea. I like that, you know? But also think that when you're trying to connect with those people and get them to help you, how can you help them? And what can you, and if you're dealing with journalists, they're going to love stories all day long, or story ideas all day long, or tips to things all day long. They're never going to reject that from you. So, all right, I'm done talking. No, I'm not done talking. But do you guys have any questions?
So you were mentioning aggressiveness. So recently we had a guest speaker that's seen in town included, and his main bullet point, I guess, was like to demonstrate humility. So how do you balance aggressiveness with humility and not coming off like a hotshot, like too arrogant?
Okay, well, when I talk about aggressiveness, I talk about aggressiveness in the work, right? So I'm aggressive when it comes to wanting a story, to making sure that I got that interview, to making sure that everything is perfect and lined up and on time and everything is in place, you know, when we're about to do, you know, for a shoot, for example, right? Right now I'm in the middle of, like today, I just sent a email off to Carlos Corbello's campaign and to Joe Garcia's campaign, and I'm pitching them on a debate, and I'm asking them if they'll come on our show and on our political show and have a debate. So it started with, I called Joe Garcia's campaign first, and these campaigns hate each other. It's amazing how they just So I asked, you know, I said to them, you know, I'm pitching this idea, I'm going to email you. They're like, well, I don't know. Well, we don't know. We have a lot of proposals. I turned it back around. I go, okay, well, I'm trying to get a feel for who else is asking you for the debate, or what are you guys thinking? What exactly do you want? What would be a perfect scenario for you, right? So I don't just take him saying, I don't know, for an answer. I continue the conversation until I get an idea of where they're at or what they're thinking, right? They're like, okay, well, this is what we're thinking about. This is where we're at. Then I call the other campaign. I make the same pitch to them. Hey, I'm going to send you a formal proposal, but I at least want to get you on the phone. I want to connect with you first. They're like, well, we don't know. We've had a lot of proposals. She's already downplaying me. So I have to find ways and play her around. So I said to her, so what do you need? She's like, well, we need dates. I go, well, I'm pretty open. She goes, no, but I need specific dates because his calendar, the congressman's calendar, is really packed and he has to do this. I was like, okay. So I didn't want to make it a part of the proposal because I wanted to leave it open, but the one key thing for them was dates. So I picked every single Sunday from now until Election Day, and I said, we're open. And my phone rang like 10 minutes later, right before I left for here. And she's like, would you be open to, now I don't want to get into all the details, but she started now asking me questions. So that's what I mean by aggressiveness. It's that you have to keep pushing and pushing, and I hate to say this, but you have to be a little pushy when you're asking people for questions and not be arrogant or whatnot. Like, I'm on the phone with her and I'm saying, this must be impossible for you. Like, I'm also being empathetic. I go, this must be super hard for you that you must have like 20 different stations, you know, across this, asking you for the same things, outside organizations, because it's not just media outlets asking for dates, but other organizations, schools are asking them to come. And she's like, yeah, it's really exhausting. Boom, we made a connection, right? So now she's like, you know what, Carrie understands me. And when she even pitched me one idea that she was thinking, she's like, you know what? She goes, I appreciate that you called me yesterday. I followed up with an email today. I'm going to call her again this afternoon. That's what we mean by aggressive. Aggressive, don't think of aggressive. Aggressive doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be nasty to be aggressive. Maybe the better word is persistent, right? And getting what you want. And at the same time, but how you're going to act in front of a recruiter and someone that you're interviewing from is going to be different than once you're a little bit on the job, right? The part where you become aggressive with the person you interview for the job is following up with them, thanking them for the interview, telling them what you're about and what you love to do and what you think is important. And I personally that wouldn't have come across to me as aggressiveness. That's coming across to me as you really want this job. You really want to be here. You got it. Question from online?
One of our online viewers asked, Jada, what do you have to do in order to transition from being a reporter to a producer?
You don't have to do much, because as a reporter, you already know how to write. You already know what the newscast is about. You basically just have to transform your mentality into thinking about how would you construct a rundown, what goes into all the technical things, knowing what your different shots are going to be in a studio, learning about graphics, learning about working with other people. I mean, that's basically just finding someone in that newsroom, finding a sponsor or finding a mentor to guide you into that transition. But you have, reporters have amazing tools at their fingertips, or they already have amazing tools with them to be producers, just like producers, could probably be reporters, except that producers, a lot like us, we don't like to talk too much. We don't like to be, we don't want to be in front of the camera, which is, a beautiful tool, and being able to just talk forever like that, how reporters can, which I admire that about them. But I think it's an easy transition, and that brings me about talking about sponsors and mentors. Do you know who your sponsor is? Do you have a sponsor? Do you have a mentor? You need sponsors and you need mentors. Do you know the difference? So a sponsor is the person who's going to advocate for you when you're not in the room. When you're not in the room. Who's going to talk about you? Who's going to talk you up? Who's going to give the recommendation about you? Who's going to be like, you know what? She has what it takes. You have to identify who your sponsors are going to be. So in this environment right now, you guys are looking, ugh, those are your professors, right? You can practice them. Those are your professors. So a lot of times when professors are sitting in rooms and talking and whatever, what are they saying about you? What are they talking about you? And what do they think about you, right? So if I call Lillian and I say, Lillian, who is one of the best students here at FIU? Does she know who you are? I need an intern stat. Does she know who you are? Because I'm sure she talks to professionals like me all the time, or connects with us. She has our email addresses. She knows how to track me down when she needs to find me, and I know to respond, right? So have you connected with her? Because she knows a whole lot of people. Who do your professors know? And do they know what your strengths are? Do they know what your passions are? Do they know what you love? Do they know what you like? Because those calls and those texts and those conversations just happen. There's times that I'm in a room with other managers and we're trying to decide who's going to go where and who's going to do what. And that all comes down to what we know about those people. Do those people reach out to us at the time? It's not when the moment hits. It's not when the breaking news story hits. It's before that. Because you want people to think about you. When it hits, you want to pop up into their mind or whatnot. So what are you doing to make sure that you've built a room of sponsors? And then when I talk about mentors, the mentor is a person that you reach out to, who connects with you, who you vent to, who you strategize with. Have you identified a mentor? Have you found someone that you can connect with and say whatnot? And I advise that usually that be someone who's a level or two levels above you, that's going to be willing to guide you or take your call just once in a while. I'm not saying looking for you to dominate all their time, but who's that professional that you can connect with that can get you to the next step? And as long as you say to them, hey, look, I just need a half hour a month, you know, that you build up all your questions and that you have that professional that you can bounce them off with, having that mentor is key. I have a couple of mentors that I reach out to when I'm trying to strategize about what I'm thinking, what I want to do. You know, I call them and I get their feedback, and then, you know, I make my decisions. And then my sponsors are the people who I have to make sure that I'm on my P's and Q's when I'm in the room, when I'm in the meetings, when I'm in the conferences, so that when they're trying to decide who's going to go to Rome, they can say, well, Carrie's going to go to Rome, you know? And making sure that I have relationships with my photographers and my reporters, and that they're like, in good chemistry with them, right? Because you want people to want to work with you. News doesn't happen, right? We all know it's a team effort. Everywhere you go, you're going to be working with people. So you want to build experiences with people that they're like, that they walk away and they're like, you know, I really liked working with that photographer. I really like, because my reporters will come in and be like, I'm only going to the middle of, you know, so-and-so with this photographer. And they will tell me that and then they won't go. If they're not going with such and such a photographer, they're not going. And I know what they mean by that, because they want to be able to work with someone who's going to drop and roll and go hard. You know, when I was at the Republican National Convention, it was 16-hour days for 5 days straight. You had to pick me up off the floor on Saturday. You know, I mean, it was exhausting. When I was in Rome, it was the same thing with the time change. When we had the Pope come in 2012, 16, 17-hour days. There's a photographer I worked with. He's the only person I go to Rome with. You know, and any time that any big projects came up with, I wanted to go with Leon. You know, because I knew it would work. So, anyways, your sponsors, your mentors. Any questions over here? Yes, sir.
First, a comment. I want to commend you on the work you do at Facing South Florida. I think you guys do great journalism.
Thank you.
Especially, I recently saw the Canova and Walton and Schultz debate, the only debate that they had between each other. I thought you did a great job.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
But my question is more in relation to the gulf between my generation, millennials, and corporate media.
Sure.
Do you see something bridging that divide in the near future? Why do you think there's such distrust between our generation and the corporate media? Do you have an opinion on this topic?
Yeah, I mean, I'll answer first. Tell me your name. What's your name?
Andrew.
Andrew? Oh, nice to meet you. I'll answer the second question first. Why is there a distrust? Because you guys I can report something, or not I, but the corporate media can report something, and you guys all you have to do is go on your phone, click, and you'll find 20 other articles against it, right? Or 20 other investigations that have been done that don't go with that. So I respect that. And at one point, the corporate media is going to have to recognize that. I'm wondering, when is that going to happen? I really am. Right now, I think what's happening is it's money, the bottom line, right? So as long as they're still making money in this model, they're not going to change. And even though there's a lot of push to change, you know, a lot of times I want to do extra work on the web, but the web isn't paying me off. Like, I'm not monetarily, right? But a lot of times in views and in reaction and feedback, I'm not getting that. So after I'm done putting Facing together, and Jim looks at me and he's like, we really should do a web extra. And I'm like, you know, I'm like, really? Like, I'm done, you know? I'm done. You know, it drives me nuts. And I know that I'm only going to, you know, it depends on what the story is, but we know we're not going to. He's like, we should really put that entire interview on the web. And I'm like, oh, is somebody really going to watch it, you know? And it's another step. It's another step in the process that is just for us. We haven't done a good job yet of some of us, some people have. They've done a great job of incorporating it into their day. Some of us haven't so far, because I just still don't have enough hours in the day to do what we're doing. And now I got to add connecting with people online, which we need to do, which we really need to do. So that's why I think that distrust is there, to answer your question, is because the corporate media is just sticking to like I was telling Lynn earlier. You see the same stories on the same stations, and everybody's doing the same thing, right? And you guys, you don't want to hear it. You want to see different things. But then again, I don't think millennials yet, or I would say the 20-somethings yet, are turning in the ratings that we need. So they're not there. So we're looking and saying, why are this demographic isn't watching? That's what I think. Don't hold me, but that's what I think happened. And what was your first question?
Do you see anything bridging that divide in the near future? Because I know, and it's true what you're saying, we're not really representing ourselves well. We're not paying for our media. We don't think in those terms, I don't think. So it's hard to make that connection, and it is monetarily driven. So I don't. To me, I don't see an end or it being resolved in any time.
Not anytime soon, until you guys take my job, right? Until you guys come in here, and then you become the corporate media, right?
Could I just kind of
Sure.
piggyback on that, because there was a question like sort of drawing on that, and I was struck by your description of your career trajectory, and I really want everybody to take note of the way Carrie talked about that she always had a plan. And I think I worry sometimes with like generations coming up that I don't always see that intense focus.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's always completely their fault either, because I think the media industry has shifted in so many directions, and what used to be a very clear path isn't
Sure.
always anymore. And I think this is kind of what Andrew was getting at as well. Like, I think for millennials looking at the media industries and going, for you it was like, here it is, associate producer, executive, special projects, like, and you did it. And I'm wondering, do you think that those paths still exist from what you see looking at younger people coming up in your station in the industry? Or do they have to think differently? I mean, you always want to have that focus on your career, but what are the changes, and how do you see, or what do you think young people need to do to kind of keep up with that? Is it the same, always they need the drive and the focus, but it's a different path now?
It is. I was worried about that, and I was a little worried coming in here because I was like, I'm going to speak about a very traditional path.
That's my generation. Like, I was at the same time as you, and it was always really clear. And now I look at them and I go, to be honest, I wish I could tell you exactly what you can do, but I'm not sure either. So.
Yeah, I was worried about that too, because the traditional path is not the same. But the things do remain a constant. You got to write, you got to shoot, right? So those things have to be key. I will say that I do watch some millennials I'll talk interns that come into the newsroom. They're not writing enough. They don't know how to write, right? I don't know they don't have enough experience writing. So even when I just want to say to you, come in and just write some basic scripts so that you can at least get your foot wet, they can't write. Or they're not up to speed on writing, right? Or they're not writing fast enough. So that's going to be one of my parting tips for life. You've got to write every day. You have to write, because wherever it is that you go work or whatever it is that you're doing, you got to write. So you have to make that a key thing that you do all the time. And I think you have to be more multifaceted, right? I've been able to get away with not knowing how to shoot, and I've been able to get away with not knowing how to edit. You can't. I think that you guys have to make sure that by the time you walk out of here, you know how to do all those three things: that you can write, that you can shoot, and that you can edit, and that you're willing to live in different places. I think those are some of the paths that you have to be willing to, and being willing to be flexible, so that when those positions are written out. The other day I had my editor, I was just so strapped and not having anyone to help me in stories. I asked my editor to help me log. And he just looked at me and I go, dude, it's not going to hurt you to learn how to produce. It's not going to hurt you because you're already editing pieces, whatever. And he did it, and he's like, oh, how do you log? I go, so, and he's a millennial. He's probably in his late 20s, but I made him log. So my short answer is, you got to walk out of here knowing how to write, shoot, and edit. Those are all key. And then all of a sudden, you have a bunch of, you are now armed and ready to be able to deal and go into and find those opportunities. So when they're there, they can't say, oh, well, I can't, we'd really love to have you, but okay, well, then I can edit. And then you get in that way, right? So then you have to kind of strategize what hole can you get in. I see in the newsrooms right now, and I can only speak to that, but the paths in right now are really limited, but it's either the assignment desk, AP, associate producer, or editing. And I don't know if I've seen any editor transfer over to writing, but if they did, and if an editor walked up to me and said, Carrie, I want to learn how to write, I would help them, because they work with me. They're right there. They're down the hall. And when I need something from them, they help me out. And I turn around and I would do the same for them. And I don't think a lot of people in the newsroom would do the same thing. A lot of editors turn into wanting to be photographers, working with live trucks and work out in the field, and they take that path. I see that path. I've seen that with a lot of our young editors. But I do say our editing staff is very young. Not one of them come out of that edit booth. They don't interact. They don't come to our meetings, although everyone's invited to our meetings, and they're not participating because they think that just because they're editors or the other people that work in the studio, running the teleprompter or working on the floor. And they just get this tunnel vision, and they just don't deal. And they know that they have their shows from this time to this time, and I'm going to get lunch from this time to this time. I'm back, and that's it. And then they don't interact. And I'm sitting here going, okay, you're either going to be in the studio forever, or this is where your career ends, because you're not strategizing, you know? So I don't have the exact answer about what, but I do know that you need to arm yourself with everything. I will say you can't do what we did, is that we just picked one thing. You know, because now the other day, like, my photographer called me this morning. He's like, we're doing a story on direct mail and how people we're doing for Facing, how campaigns, you know, just inundate people with direct mail, and where does this direct mail go? And it ends up going in the trash. And he goes, you know, Carrie, you really should send out an email, and everyone needs to shoot, you know, them getting their direct mail. And I'm sitting here going, now you want me to shoot? But he's real, right? Because we don't have the time and the resources to go sit at someone's house and wait for the direct mail to come, you know, when everyone could just sit on their phones, get their direct mail. Right, exactly. We don't have that kind of time.
Kat, our online viewer asked, from your perspective, what specific technical or professional skills have helped you get along the way? And do you believe the TV media industry is dying out?
What technical professional skills
Correct.
helped me get along the way? Again, writing. You know, when I was at Channel 7, I was a tape loader. When I wasn't loading tapes, I found, and she's come to speak here, I found Glenna Milberg, who reports at Channel 10. I found Glenna Milberg, and I was like, I asked her to be one of my mentors. And I asked her, I go, will you review my review my scripts? And she did. And she tore them up into little pieces. So write, edit, and learn how to shoot. I mean, those are things that, you know, even right now I find myself going, I'm really going to have to learn how to edit, or, you know, I want to make sure that I can stay relevant. So that's what's important for me now, is how am I going to stay relevant? So I need to jump into the other technical stuff is social media, you know? And that's another way you guys can be super valuable in the newsroom. There's a bunch of us that don't want to deal, but we have to. So make sure that you're really, really well connected in that medium, and knowing how it works. And not just knowing how it works, but how can it work for me? So if you're coming into a newsroom or you're working somewhere, figure out how you can benefit the environment that you're in with social media. Find out how you can benefit them, and find somebody and talk to them, and don't be afraid, don't be shy. They want to hear from you, and make that connection. And then, do I think TV media is dying? No way. No way. I don't. I really don't. I'm just hoping that it'll get to a point where we could just do more long format stuff, right? 'Cause like what we do, I want to go more in that direction. You know, I love what Fusion is doing, right? I love what they're doing, you know, the investigations and whatnot. So what Jim does on Facing. So, you know, whenever they tell me I only have 3 minutes for a story, I go and I find Focus, and I find Facing, and I find other outlets to do our longer format.
Leo, our online viewer asked, what is your relationship with reporters and other co-workers like outside of the newsroom?
When I was younger, we used to all hang out together. It was a very social atmosphere. Now I'm married and I have a daughter. I mean, now there really isn't that time to socialize and whatnot. But I think I have a very good relationship with a lot of our reporters. I talk to them on the phone. We collaborate. I go to birthday parties. I invite them to events. Is that what I wonder if he means socially, or what's my relationship like?
If Leo gives us feedback, we'll know.
What's my relationship like with reporters outside of the newsroom? It's changed, because I remember when I was a producer and I was an AP, not even AP, when I was a producer and associate producer, I think I was able to be more social with them. But if I'm managing them reporters, it's a different relationship. Like, I don't need to know everything that's going on in their private life. They don't want to know mine. Everyone wants to keep their lives separate. Is he saying something?
He said, socially, smiley face, thank you.
Socially. It's a fine line, right? Like, do I go out and have drinks and have dinner with some of my reporters? Those that I trust, those that I've known for a really long time. And you have to be careful, right? Because you don't want to say anything inappropriate or someone to take the wrong way, and then when you have to chastise them or call them on something, you run into an awkward situation. So, but there's a couple of reporters that I hang with or that I know socially, and I keep it at that are friends, because you spend so much time in this business. These are your friends. These are the people you end up spending. I spend more time with them than I do my own family. You do. Yes, ma'am.
What were some of the obstacles that you had to overcome, not only as a woman, but as a Latina? And I mean, you've done everything. And I mean, your route has kind of been, the very typical route. But what are some difficult things that you've had to overcome in this field?
I don't know if it's me, or I always felt like I had to work harder to prove myself because I was a woman, right? I always felt like I had to walk into a room and know more than everybody else because I was black, because I'm a woman. So I've always had those things just around here, and I'm cognizant of them. But obstacles, my biggest obstacles was, one of them was at CNN. I get to CNN, and I know that someone in that crowd didn't get that job. And there's a lot of people who have been there for a long time, right? So sometimes you can walk into an environment and that person was expecting a promotion or whatnot. So there were a lot of people looking at me going, do you even really deserve to be here? And I got that feeling. So that was really tough. And then they're looking at me, and I'll be honest, and they're like, you're black. I didn't really get the Latina thing, but you're black. So it was hard, and they were hard on me. They were tough on me. Even my own team doubted me, doubted every move that I made. And it took like months and months and months and months for them to actually trust me and actually understand. And I don't know that I accomplished that, And then at one time, you just have to say, you know what? I'm not here to make you happy. At one point, I just had to be like, I'm done trying to prove myself to people, because they've been there a long time. I mean, there were writers. Because to be a writer at CNN, that's a profession. You're making 70, 80 grand a year. You got your I mean, they're good. They're not trying to do anything else, and they've been there for a really long time. They have a lot of experience, and I respect them, But they brought me in for a reason. They wanted new blood. They probably needed to check off some boxes, I will say that when I was on the weekend, I started off on the weekend mornings, which I was super happy with, right? I think you start, like at a network, you start slow in a weekend morning. And someone on the day side shift, one of the EPs, made a mistake. Something happened, and they demoted her, and they switched us. They made her the morning EP, and they made me the morning day side weekday EP. And I think that was a huge mistake, because to take someone who had only been there 3 months and put them in the firing line, I felt like I was in the firing, just under fire every day. That was cruel. But they were so busy trying to teach her a lesson that they ended up sacrificing me. So, I get it why people were like, this girl just got here, and she's only been here 3 months, and now she's been whatever. And then there was some, and then people came up to me, and they're like, well, you realize why you're here. And I'm like, why? And they're like, well, you're the only black EP at this network. Because if you looked down all the EPs throughout the entire day, I was the only black one, or black, even Latina one that was there. So I'm like, okay, right? Trying to check off boxes or whatnot. So that was a huge obstacle for me. It was super, super tough, and people were not forgiving. They made it hard, but I just went in there every day, and I did my best. And little by little, I recruited fans, little by little, and with being personable and being respectful and being like, hey, I know you've been here 30 years, but I need you to put this out for me right now, And little by little, I tried to win over people. Towards the end, it didn't end well. I had problems with one of my managers, and she basically, this is the other thing that happens, I think, in all organizations. A manager comes in, and they want to bring their own people in, right? So they just want to push out and find their own people. So I bumped heads with her, but I was done at that point too. So I was just kind of like, I'm not gonna go down this road. And I was working on my specials, half hours that I was doing. So I had already gotten the budget and the money. Like I had already worked other people there, so I was happy. So I didn't worry about her. And soon after that, it took me 9 months, but like by the time she came in, I started deciding, okay, it's time to go. So it took me 9 months to work my sources, to work people, and kind of figure out what my next move was going to be. And then I got to come back here and be a special products VP. So those are my obstacles. The biggest thing is, yeah, people are going to look at you and not think that you're good enough. And people did look at me that way. And then they make snide remarks, or they don't help you when they can, or they ask you really difficult questions when they know the answer to already, and they don't help you. You still have to be ready to fight. You're ready to fight. Right there. What's your name?
Maria.
Maria. Hi.
I had a question in terms of, I think that what you mentioned about, networking and making connections is really, really essential in that business. I feel like you made that very clear, and this business has made it very clear. But also, I think I speak for myself personally, but I'm kind of lost in terms of like, when I make connections and sending out that first email that it may be awkward, but following up, how do you, what's a very good way to follow up so that it's not always the same thing, like you're not always doing the same thing? How do you, go about making those connections and keeping them along the years so that, when you actually do need their assistance or you want to speak to them, like it's not like, hey, I'm just emailing you because I need you. Kind of
Right. So there's a couple different things. Is there anyone in particular? I mean, you don't have to name names, but do you know what the position is, or can you at least tell me what their role is? One person you'd like to stay in touch with?
I was just speaking in terms of like my personal experience, because I interned with the alumna in NBC during the summer, and I made a ton of connections, but then I didn't really know how to follow up with them, like in terms of like, because I made like digital connections, and I made marketing connections, and I made reporting connections, so I made a whole bunch of them, but I don't know how to go about.
Sure.
And after meeting them, being like, hey, my name is Maria, but then emailing them something that was awkward.
Yeah. No, it is. I find the same thing too. I'm like, what am I gonna say, And I don't need them right this moment. I just might, for me, that was one of the VPs at the network, and she came to speak to the students, and I was like, I think it'd be important for me to know the VP at CBS Evening News. That might be a good thing to do. So you're just kind of like, oh, what am I gonna say? Send them, say if it's a producer, and send them a story that you saw or something that you think is interesting, and say, hey, when we were talking, I know that you're always looking for stories. This is what I found. Thank you again for your time. I look forward to talking to you in the future. What else can you say? Find things that you can connect with them with. If you just met someone, and I'll be blunt, if you just met with them one time and you just said hello, and you didn't have like a real conversation or get to know them or anything like that, that's going to be a hard connection to keep, right? So if you do meet people, find out things about them. Find out things that can further the conversation with them, right? Because if you don't know exactly what they do or what they're into or exactly what their role is, then you can't connect with them, right? And you shouldn't just do it on an email. Now you have Twitter. You can follow them on Twitter, retweet whatever they're tweeting, because people are paying attention to that. Like whatever it is that if you do get to that point where you connect with them on Facebook, like their stuff. It is because I think I'm just trying to think of ways that there's people that I want to stay connected with, so that's what I do. Like I retweet them and whatnot, and so that I stay current in their memory. Don't try, because you said I met all these people. Pick like 3 to 5, right? Because you're not going to have time, or you're not really going to be consistent with keeping up with the tons of people that you met. Pick 3 to 5 key people, right, that you really made a connection, right? Because you're not going to be able, all those people you're not going to be able to follow up with. You really probably don't need them all. But can you think of 3 to 5 people?
And it also goes back to what you said about, it not being like a hi, nice to meet you, okay, peace out. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
It's kind of like more of like a, sitting down and talking with them about their experience in, as a producer, or their experience as a talent recruiter, for example, because it's different perspectives, but yeah, I see what you mean about, really making that connection in terms of, how to follow up rather than just being like leaving their name.
Yeah, you're not gonna get huge takeaways from those, right? And then after the first email, they're gonna be super nice. It was nice meeting you too, and then yes, the conversation's over. What else is there to say? That's happened to me. Like when I go to conventions, I meet people, but you don't have more than a quick conversation. You shake their hands. You really want to stay in touch with them. Then you get back. You're all excited. You send the email, and then after that, and it's dead. And some of those you're gonna have to let go, unless you make a deliberate effort to either meet them again, find somewhere that they're speaking and make sure that you attend if they're involved in something, And then as you start to hone in on what you really need, do I really need this person? Can this person really help me? Then after you stayed in touch with them a little bit, be like, okay, I'm about to graduate. And like I said, my students, you know, they just email, they just say, hey, Carrie, I'm just touching base. I hope everything's great. I hope everything's great with your daughter. I'm about to head into my senior year. I got this award, or this is one of the latest things that I wrote. If you have a chance, you know, check it out. So write, because I'm sure you're writing every day. Whatever you write, whatever you're working on, it's okay to send them your work so you could see. Do you feel like I answered your question? Okay, you got it. Anyone else?
I really appreciate all the information. It's amazing. I'm making notes because I do my students with internships and all that stuff. From these young people, most of them are graduating in a few months.
Sure.
And I know for experience talking to them over and over in different semesters, it's overwhelming just to know, oh my God, I need a job. So what would you recommend to these beautiful people to actually, you know, be encouraged to go there and get them and, you know, try to find their career path?
That's a good question. You spend a lot of money. That should give you energy, right? You spend a lot of money for your education, so get on it. Don't be afraid to even apply for the small stuff, number one. Don't be afraid to apply out of your comfort zone. You could say, Carrie, I can't see. Think of the one city you don't be in. So go find that city, you know. Don't be picky. Don't be picky at this stage, right? You can't, I don't think you could be throwing your nose up and be like, oh, I can't be bothered, right? I think you really need to, you need to look around and be willing to go anywhere, be willing to work anywhere, and whatnot. Is anyone in that stage? Like, I mean, do you have any specific examples with?
No, it's in general when I speak to them, it's like, oh, so have you been looking? You're graduating, you know, and I'm talking about different semesters because I do that every semester.
Sure.
And so I was like, oh, I don't know where to start. But if that's one thing, it's, oh, I saw something in Texas, but I don't know anybody there. That's
So.
Situation, but then it's more like, oh, should I go there all the way?
Go, there's people in Texas. When I was in Philly, I knew nobody in Philly. The people in the newsroom were older, because I was in my mid-20s, a lot of people were older, so I couldn't really mix with them. And I'm producing the 11 o'clock newscast, so I'm getting off of work at 11:30 midnight, and I have no friends. So do you know that I found a salsa club in Philly? So I would go there on Tuesday nights because I wanted to, like, I missed our music, I missed pastelitos, you miss it. So I missed home. You know, you go through it takes a good 6 months to a year to adjust. The first 6 months to a year are just you going, okay, I'm comfortable here, figuring out your job and figuring out the people. It's a huge adjustment transition period. So I found the salsa club, and I go to the salsa club once a week, and I made friends. And so you force yourself. But right, we're journalists. We should be okay with going out and doing the unknown. We should be okay with talking to strangers. That's the nature of our business. So we shouldn't be afraid to move to Texas or move to Seattle or move to and experience. And this is such time to do that. Like, I don't regret a minute of it. I don't regret the risks that I took, and the experiences that I had, and that I just picked up and left and went and got to know people and met people, and it's priceless, right? And now I work in a newsroom here, and when I see people that didn't leave and stayed here the whole time, and then I got to go, I'm grateful for it, right? Because we're still back in the same place. Miami, yeah, it's growing and changing, but and I'm glad that I can bring those experiences with me to the table. So when we're making decisions and we're talking about stories, I can bring that to the table. So I think that makes me more valuable. But again, enough about me. What are you going to do? 3-4 months out, they shouldn't be wondering about what they're going to do next. You should have been plotting your junior year. You should have been plotting and planting seeds so that you're not sitting a few months out from graduation going, what am I going to do? There's another young reporter intern I had at CNN. She's a reporter now. She was planting those seeds and working on her reel and having her tape and sending it out, and she ended up somewhere in the middle of Texas, And she went, and now and from there she jumped to Alabama, jumped to DC, and now I think she's jumped to Philly in the last 4 years or so. But you have to have a plan. You're like, okay, well I just have to, when I say a plan, okay, the plan means, okay, 3 times a week I'm looking. 3 times a week for an hour or 2 hours a day, I am specifically looking around the country. Then you have to plot out on your calendar, just like you plot out everything else on your calendar, this is the time that I'm going to spend networking. Have you joined organizations? Do you go to SPJ meetings? There's the National Association of Hispanic Journalists. There's National Association of Black Journalists. There's the Asians. They always have different events that everyone's invited to, and even if you're not Black, you can still go. And if you're not Hispanic, you could still go to the Black ones. You can go to the Asian one. Like the Asian ones, they teach one. They have events every year, executive leadership programs that they have going on all the time. And you're like, well, Carrie, go because you're going to meet people, right? You've got to go and get out, find these people. You have to find people like me. Where are we hanging out? And come meet us. Does that make sense? And like Telemundo, go back and visit, right? So when did your internship end? Have you gone back?
Yeah, I went back during the year. They're always just so hectic that it's kind of hard to get in there. But yeah, I try to like go and visit every so often.
Yeah, just let them see your face, right? At least see your face. I at least appreciate when at least somebody, I'll remember, they come back. And you just don't, you don't want to get out of people's minds. You want to stay in their minds. And when do you graduate?
In December.
Yay. No? So right now, I know you're networking, you're writing every day, you're reading every day, and you're designating, you have to make it a plot to go online every day and check and check and check and send out those applications all the time. You don't wait. You should start now. You should be doing that. That should be something, let's put our social life a little bit on hold and let's dedicate time to our future. And you have to plot that out in your calendar. You have to make the time to search. So, we're done? Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Well, I think you've all gotten a lot of really good advice, and I think we can learn a lot from what Carrie's saying. Maybe some of you, now you're networking, so here's someone here you can network with, right?
Yeah, definitely.
This is the thing you need to do. You need to get out there and meet people. What she's saying is very, very true.
And just start here. I mean, they have to connect with you, connect with your professors. Who do they know? Who are they connected with? And start small. But go to those events. There's events happening all the time. You got to get out there and shake some hands, because even it's someone who might be married to a journalist or someone who works in a different, even and newspapers are okay, and smaller media blogs are okay, right?